What if your dog hated something you do every single day? Not something obvious, not something you would do with the intention of hurting them, something that feels completely normal, something that even feels affectionate. The problem is that dogs don't complain, not the way we do. They don't turn to you and say, "Stop that." They don't send messages. They don't start difficult conversations. They just grow quieter. And most owners never realize what caused that distance, because the distancing was slow, silent, and disguised as normal behavior. In this video, I'm going to show you 7 things your dog hates that you're probably doing without realizing it. These aren't mistakes made by bad people. They're mistakes made by people who never had access to the right information. People who love their dog, but are, without meaning to, getting the language wrong. Each item is backed by science, and every single one will change how you read your dog's behavior starting today. But I'm saving the most important one for last, because the 7th item is the behavior that hurts dogs the most, and that almost no owner recognizes as a problem. In fact, most people believe they're doing the right thing when they do exactly this. You'll understand when you get there. For now, let's start with the mistake almost every dog owner has already made today. Have you hugged your dog today? Be honest, most owners do. It's almost a reflex. The dog comes close, you open your arms, wrap them around their body, squeeze a little. To you, it's pure affection. It's the most instinctive way to say, "I love you," without using words. But your dog doesn't read a hug that way, and understanding why changes everything. For humans, hugging means connection. It's the physical gesture we use to say, "You're safe with me." It's been part of our emotional language for thousands of years. The problem is that dogs didn't evolve with that same repertoire. Their bodies were shaped to read the world in a completely different way. When you place your arms around a dog's body, especially over the shoulders or neck, what they register isn't affection, it's restraint. In canine body language, placing weight or pressure on another animal is a signal of dominance or an imminent threat. It's what a predator does before immobilizing a prey. It's what a stronger dog does to assert hierarchy. So when you hug your dog, their nervous system receives a very ancient signal. Someone is restraining me. A study published by psychologist Stanley Coren from the University of British Columbia analyzed more than 250 photos of people hugging dogs, images posted on social media, meaning moments owners believed were positive. The results were striking. In 81.6% of the photos, the dogs showed at least one clear sign of stress. Ears pulled back, head turned away, whale eye, that visible white of the eye, yawning out of context, lip licking. Signals that go unnoticed if you don't know what to look for. What does this mean in practice? That the hug you give with genuine love may be received as a moment of tense tolerance. Your dog endures it because they trust you enough to not react, but tolerating is not the same as enjoying, and that difference matters. If you want to show physical affection to your dog, animal behavior science points to other options. Petting the chest, the side of the neck, the base of the ears. Light touch, no pressure, no restraint. Affection in their language, not yours. And if this already changed how you see your bond, wait until the next item. Because what most owners do when their dog makes a mistake is even more misunderstood than hugging. Your dog did something wrong. Knocked something over, chewed a shoe, peed in the wrong place. What did you do? Most people raise their voice. Not necessarily in explosive anger, sometimes it's just a firm, loud no, or the dog's name said with that specific weight we use when we're frustrated. It feels like correction. It feels like discipline. It even feels like responsible ownership. But from your dog's point of view, something completely different is happening. Dogs don't process verbal punishment with the logic we imagine. For an animal to associate a punishment with a specific behavior, that consequence has to happen within less than 2 seconds of the behavior. 2 seconds. If more time has passed, and in most cases it has, the dog literally cannot connect what they did with what you're communicating now. What they can do is register the emotional state of the environment. And when you yell, what they don't read is, "I made a mistake and I'm being corrected." What they read is, The human who is my source of safety is in a state of intense agitation, and I don't know why. That creates anxiety, not learning. A study published in the journal Scientific Reports in 2021, conducted by the University of Porto, followed dogs trained with positive reinforcement methods and dogs trained with punishment and coercion, including raised voices and harsh tones. Dogs in the second group showed significantly higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, along with behaviors linked to learned pessimism, less initiative, less curiosity, more inhibition. In other words, dogs exposed to frequent vocal punishment learn not to try, and that's the opposite of a healthy dog. There's more. Dogs are highly sensitive to prosody, the rhythm, tone, and melody of the human voice. They may not understand the words, but they understand the emotional state behind them with surprising accuracy. A loud, tense tone is processed as a threat, regardless of the intention behind it. So when you shout no with love in your heart and frustration in your voice, your dog doesn't hear the intention. They feel the state, and the state says danger. What works instead? A calm, firm, consistent tone, immediate redirection to the correct behavior, reinforcement when they get it right. This isn't permissiveness, it's communication on a frequency they can actually receive. Your dog isn't challenging you when they make a mistake. They're trying to navigate a world they don't fully understand yet. The question is whether you're going to respond with clarity or with noise. And speaking of communication, the next item is about a gesture most owners believe is pure connection, but your dog reads in a completely different way. Have you ever looked into your dog's eyes and thought you were sharing a moment of deep connection? What if that moment was actually making them uncomfortable? In the human world, eye contact means intimacy. It's what we do when we want to say, I'm here, I see you, I care about you. It's been part of our bonding language since we were babies, so it's completely natural to try to replicate that with an animal you love. The problem is that dogs evolved with a completely different visual grammar. Between dogs, prolonged direct eye contact isn't affection, it's a challenge. It's what they use right before a confrontation. It's what a dominant dog does to test another. It's what happens in the seconds leading up to a fight. When you hold a steady gaze into your dog's eyes for too long, their nervous system receives a very clear message: I am being challenged. Now, before that sounds discouraging, there's an alternative, and it's a subtle one. You've probably seen your dog give that soft, half-closed look, relaxed eyelids, slow blinking, almost like they're sleepy. It looks like nothing, but it's actually communication. In ethology, the science of animal behavior, this is known as an appeasement signal. It's part of the body language dogs use to communicate calm, safety, and lack of threat. Slow blinking is the ocular version of that signal, and it works both ways. A study published in 2020 in the journal Scientific Reports, conducted by the University of Sussex, found that dogs were significantly more likely to approach and display affiliative behavior, like voluntary proximity and physical contact, toward humans who slow blinked at them, compared to those with a neutral expression or sustained direct gaze. In other words, slow blinking is real eye contact, true exchange. A fixed stare is a threat. So, here's the practical shift. The next time you look at your dog and want to say, I love you with your eyes, don't hold the gaze. Soften it. Blink slowly. Let your eyelids relax and fall gently. And watch what happens. Most of the time, they'll blink back. That small moment, that mutual blink, is your dog responding in their language that you are safe, that you belong in their world. It's more intimate than any prolonged stare you've ever held. If this is changing the way you read your dog, consider subscribing to the channel. We post every week to help owners understand what their dog is trying to say. And leave a like if this resonates with you. Do you have a fixed schedule for walking your dog? For most owners, the answer is more or less. Monday it's at 7, Tuesday depends on work, Wednesday it rained, Thursday was later, weekends are completely different. That sounds reasonable. For a human, life is like that, variable, unpredictable, full of exceptions. But for your dog, This is a silent source of chronic stress. Dogs are pattern-driven animals, not because they're stubborn or limited, but because of their neurological architecture. Their nervous system is built to find safety in predictability. Knowing what comes next for a dog is the same as being safe. When the environment is consistent, their brain can operate in rest mode. When it's chaotic, it switches to alert mode. And living in alert mode chronically comes at a cost. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is released every time the body detects threatening unpredictability. In acute doses, it's healthy. It prepares the body to act. But in chronic doses, it wears the system down. It suppresses the immune system. It compromises digestion. It alters behavior. It shortens lifespan. A study published in Applied Animal Behavior Science showed that dogs exposed to unstable routines had significantly higher baseline cortisol levels than dogs with consistent routines, even when owners described them as calm or adaptable. The dog looked calm on the surface. Inside, their nervous system was working all the time. And here's the detail most owners miss. That destructive behavior when you leave, that unexplained agitation at the end of the day, that nonstop barking, these are often not temperament problems. They are symptoms of a nervous system that never gets to rest because it never knows what's coming next. Your dog isn't being difficult. They're exhausted from not being able to predict. The good news is that the solution is simple. Not easy, but simple. Consistency. Not perfection, consistency. Roughly fixed times for feeding, walks, and attention. A departure ritual they recognize. A return ritual that signals you're back. You don't need to become a robot with a stopwatch in hand. You need to create predictable anchors in your dog's daily life. Anchors that say, the world makes sense. You are safe. I will come back. And when you build that, something shifts in your dog. The tension that was there, the one that you might not even have noticed, starts to release. The body relaxes. The behavior changes. Not because you trained them, because you communicated safety. But there's another kind of unpredictability that can be even more damaging, and it's one most owners create with the best intentions. The next item will show you why forcing your dog to be social might be one of the most harmful things you do.
Have you ever taken your dog to meet other dogs expecting them to learn how to socialize? Probably with good intentions. Probably because someone told you they needed it, that staying home too much would make them anxious, withdrawn, difficult. But what if that interaction, the way it happened, actually created the problem you were trying to prevent? Socialization is real. It's necessary. But there's a huge difference between socialization and forced exposure, and confusing the two is one of the most common and most well-intentioned mistakes owners make. When you place a dog in an intense social situation before they've shown they're ready, what happens in their nervous system isn't learning, it's overload. The brain switches into survival mode, fight, flight, or freeze, and any new information that comes in during that state gets tagged with a negative association. In other words, you're not teaching them to like other dogs. You're teaching them that other dogs appear when they already feel unsafe. The neuroscience of learning is clear on this. The hippocampus, the brain structure responsible for consolidating memories, functions less effectively under acute stress. Memories formed during high activation of the sympathetic nervous system tend to be encoded as threats, not as neutral or positive experiences. This has a name: involuntary aversive conditioning. You didn't mean to condition a negative response, but your dog's nervous system doesn't know that. So how can you tell if your dog is overwhelmed during a social interaction? The signs are all there, but they're easy to miss when you're focused on the moment. Ears pinned back, tail low or stiff, tense body, attempts to move away that get dismissed as temporary shyness, repeated lip licking, yawning out of context. These are not signs of a dog adapting. They're slow-motion distress signals. A study published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior found that dogs with a history of negative social exposures, including forced interactions, showed significantly stronger fear responses in later social situations, even when those situations were objectively safe. The impact of forced socialization doesn't just disappear, it lingers. Healthy socialization works very differently. It starts at a distance, far enough for the dog to observe without feeling threatened. It progresses at the dog's pace. It uses voluntary approach as the measure of progress, and it stops when the dog signals they've reached their limit. The metric isn't how long they stayed. The metric is how they felt when they left. A dog that leaves a social interaction tired but calm learned something. A dog that leaves agitated, panting, or withdrawn went past their limit. And the next interaction will be harder. Respecting your dog's pace in social situations isn't about protecting them from the world. It's about building the foundation of trust that allows them to explore the world safely. Without that foundation, the next item starts to make more sense than it should. Because when a dog never learns that their signals are respected, they eventually stop giving them.
Your dog always warns before they bite. Always. This isn't an optimistic belief, it's a well-documented principle in canine behavior science. Dogs don't attack out of nowhere. They have an entire repertoire of signals that communicate discomfort, overload, and boundaries, a scale that starts subtle and becomes increasingly explicit. The problem isn't that dogs don't warn. The problem is that we've learned not to see. The canine stress scale, extensively described by Norwegian ethologist and trainer Turid Rugås, who spent decades studying calming signals, begins with almost imperceptible gestures, looking away, turning the head, lip-licking, yawning. If these signals are ignored, the dog escalates. Tense body, pinned ears, low or stiff tail, rigid posture. And if no one responds, the escalation continues. Low growl, wrinkled muzzle, teeth showing. And if even that is ignored or punished, the dog learns something devastating. They learn that their warnings don't work. And a dog that learns their warnings don't work is a dog that skips steps, a dog that goes from discomfort straight to a bite, because they've been unintentionally taught that everything before the bite is useless. This is the history behind almost every bite without warning case investigated by veterinary behaviorists. There was no lack of warning. There were years of warnings being ignored. A survey published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior analyzed 103 cases of children bitten by family dogs. In over 70% of the cases, caregivers reported that the dog had never shown any signs. But when researchers reviewed videos and photos leading up to the incidents, the signals were there. Ears back, tense body, head turned away, attempts to move away that you interpret as being dramatic. The next time your dog shows any of these signals, pause. Step back. Give them space. Watch what happens to their body. If they relax, you just had a conversation with your dog. A real conversation, in their language. And that builds something no amount of training can replace. The certainty in their nervous system that when they communicate, someone listens. But there's one more level beyond this. One behavior that doesn't just ignore your dog's signals, it punishes them. And that's where things become truly serious. Because the seventh item is the one I promised from the beginning, and it's exactly as heavy as I said it would be.
Here's the behavior I promised in the introduction. The most misunderstood, the most quietly devastating, and the one that concerns me the most when I look at the relationship between humans and dogs. Your dog trembles during thunder, hides under the bed, refuses to enter certain places, freezes on a walk for no apparent reason, howls when you leave. And what many owners do, with genuine love, with the best intentions, is try to correct it. There's nothing there. Stop it. You're fine. Said firmly, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with a leash correction when the dog freezes, sometimes with a raised voice when the behavior repeats. The intention is to help. The message that lands is something else. To understand what happens in the brain of a fearful dog being punished, you need to understand what fear actually is neurologically. Fear is not a choice. It's not disguised disobedience. It's not manipulation. It's a response from the limbic system, the most ancient part of the brain shared by all mammals, to a perceived threat. When your dog is afraid, the amygdala, the structure responsible for processing danger, is in control. And the amygdala doesn't have access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, learning, and decision-making. When fear is active, rational learning is offline. Punishing a fearful dog doesn't teach anything, but it does encode something. What their nervous system records in that moment is a simple equation. I was afraid, and then the person who is my source of safety added more threat. The danger came from you. Researchers at the University of Bristol published a study in Applied Animal Behavior Science showing that dogs exposed to punitive methods in fear-related contexts developed more intense and generalized anxiety responses over time, not less. Punishment didn't extinguish fear, it deepened it and added a new layer, the association between the owner and danger. A dog that learns fear leads to punishment doesn't become braver, they become more alone. Because now they are afraid and they can't turn to the one being who should be their safe harbor, because that person has also become part of the threat. That's the real cost of punishing fear. It's not just ineffective, it's the exact opposite of what you're trying to build. What works is the opposite approach. Calm presence without forcing proximity. Not reinforcing fear with exaggerated emotional reactions. It's not about frantically comforting and saying it's okay in an overstimulated way, because that can escalate arousal too. It's about becoming a stable point of calm in the middle of their internal chaos. It's about communicating through your body and presence, I'm here and I am not the danger. This doesn't change overnight. But it does change, and when it does, what you build is something no training method can buy. The certainty at the deepest level of your dog's nervous system that you are safety. Not authority, not control. Safety. That moment when your dog is trembling and comes to you and you simply stay, that moment was never small for them, and it shouldn't be small for you either.
If something in this video changed the way you look at your dog, even if it was just one item, even just a small detail, you're already doing something most owners never do. You're trying to understand their language. And that's exactly why we post every week, to help you read what your dog is trying to tell you before they stop trying. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss the next one. Now, tell me in the comments, which of the 7 items made the most sense to you? Which one surprised you? Which one made you think, I do this every week without realizing? I want to read it. Seriously. Because understanding your dog starts with a question, and you've already asked the most important one just by watching until the end.